Public Engagement and Scholarship in the University Outreach Engagement. And with me today is Dr. Laurie Van Egeren, who is the Interim Associate Provost for University Outreach and Engagement. Today is the start of an 8-workshop series on broader impacts. I will be going over the other workshops near the end of today's session. These workshops are jointly sponsored by University Outreach and Engagement and the Office of Research and Innovation. So first, let me quickly go over the content of today's session. So Laurie's going to be starting by talking about what broader impacts are and why they're important. She's going to give us the broad perspective. She's also going to talk about common broader impact goals. So what do we mean by broader impacts? What are some common impact areas? She's also going to be giving some broader impact examples from Michigan State University. And then I'll follow up by talking about what some of the key elements of a great broader impacts plan are, and point you to some resources that will help you get started in developing your own broader impacts plan. Laurie?
Thank you, Miles, and welcome everybody. We're very happy to, as Miles said, happy to have you here. This is something that our office has been working on for several years. It didn't really used to have a place in MSU. And there's some, while not all BI impacts are associated with outreach and engagement, many of them are and can be in some of the most common ways that people use them. So we want to be able to share that kind of support with you so that you know that it's available. So let's start with the basics. What are broader impacts and why are they important? And we're going to be speaking today within the framework and the language of the National Science Foundation, because broader impacts is specifically the language of NSF. Many of the general points we're going to be making are broadly applicable across many funding agencies as well as foundations. So any kind of agency is going to expect impact. And even though they may not specifically request a section that speaks to that, you're always going to be wanting to be able to link what you're doing to a larger impact for society. And even if you're working in space or you're working at the bottom of the ocean, being able to say that this is advancing our knowledge, this is related to our understanding of the world, that's also an impact. And then many of us are doing work that is more directly applicable or can be. So in context, I feels like BI can seem like a recent addition to the proposal process. There's a lot more discussion about it in recent years than there had been in the past, I think, within academic institutions. But actually, the spirit of BI has been part of NSF, or BI has been part of the spirit of NSF since NSF was established. And so you can see even before NSF was established in 1950, the Science Advisory Board that was created early on following World War I in response to military action. Is in the evolution of our national life, we've reached a place where science and the research, which has discovered and released its powers, cannot be regarded as matters of accidental growth and application, but must be consciously related to our social life and well-being. So even in 1934, our federal government was thinking about how do we use science to affect the social life of Americans. Now, it's been in 1997, it was explicitly mandated in the review criteria for proposals submitted to NSF. And it's been clarified in 2010, 2013. It was actually clarified again in 2021, although there weren't major changes at that point. And NSF has funded centers that were meant to provide support for investigators as they try to figure out how to do their broader impacts, because for many scientists, this is not something that they've had training in. It may not have been something that was emphasized in their labs as graduate students or postdocs, and it can sometimes feel pretty disconnected in ways from the research that you may be doing. So NSF funded the National Alliance for Broader Impacts. Oops, that's not ARIS, that's NABI, which was really designed to build the community of investigators and their support people. So research support, such as research administrators, or those who are conducting programs, who are working in K-12, and who know how to implement programs on the ground. As NABI ended, the Center for Advancing Research Impacts in Society, or ARIS, was funded. And that group is really focusing on providing capacity building, professional development, and institutional infrastructure around research impact. And it was specifically changed from broader impacts to research impacts with the approval of NSF, to emphasize that this is not simply that broader impacts language of NSF. I've been in many conversations where broader impacts is used as the words of what societal impact is. But that's really, again, NSF, and the larger conversation is about advancing research impacts across any funding agency. I happen to have been on the national steering committee for the National Alliance for Broader Impacts, and I'm a co-PI for the Center for Advancing Research Impacts in Society. So we get to be part of that. And then MSU recently went through an institutional development program with ARIS to build infrastructure and resources for BI. So also it's good to know that research impact is an international movement. So other countries, as well as US agencies, they may call BI something different, but many build BI into their national plans for science advancement and actually have it better integrated than the United States does, because it goes across their agencies. And they might call it knowledge mobilization, or what are some other ones, Miles? Knowledge mobilization. I'm blanking.
Well, knowledge mobilization is the one that comes to mind for me.
It's a big one. It's Canada and the UK. So there are a variety of ways to think about it. Okay, you can go ahead. So there are two proposal review criteria at NSF, which is great. There's only two that you need to really focus on, and they're very clear in terms of what they are. One is intellectual merit, and that's the science. How good is the science? How innovative is the science that you're doing? The broader impacts is the second criteria, and that's the potential for the proposed activity to benefit society or advance societal outcomes. And this is often the one that can be more confusing for investigators to respond to, because you know what your research is and you're able to identify the intellectual merit. And then it's, many of you will be able to easily identify what you would like the broader impact to be, but sometimes it can be challenging to think about how to enact that and relate that to the research. And to succeed, your proposal must excel in both areas. So I won't say that these are equally weighted, but more and more, we definitely are hearing, and we're hearing this from the NSF program officers as well, that broader impacts is something that they pay a lot of attention to. And so it's something that should be definitely taken into account and thought through very thoughtfully. You can go ahead, Miles. So why are these important? Well, science should benefit the people whose taxes support it. We know that Americans actually view science positively. I think there's been a perception in the past few years that Americans are very skeptical of science. Americans really support science very much. It's parts of science that have been politicized that come into trouble. But overall, Americans support science, and 82% of American adults believe that over the next 20 years, those science developments will make people's lives better. So people do respect science. Actually, people respect individual scientists. But it's when we get certain aspects politicized that it begins to feel like people are very, disbelieving in science, which can be very frustrating for people in our fields. Go ahead. So that kind of, so as we've learned, that kind of support is not guaranteed. We need to have public engagement to help the public understand and support science. So as Franz Cordova, who was the past NSF director, said, we need to engage the public in order to help improve understanding of the value of basic research and why our projects are worthy of investment. So it's really critical to link the science that you're conducting to that value for society. And both individuals and especially legislators are very interested in this. And this is something that legislators ask about consistently, both from individual investigators in some cases, but also from the agencies. Next slide. Another reason that broader impacts are important is that what we're seeing is the more newer generations of faculty and students are increasingly seeking opportunities to engage the public with their research. They're coming from a mindset where they want their research to be meaningful and understood outside of their academic domain. And they tend to be, or you tend to be, a more engaged and community-oriented generation who may have come up in a service context of feeling that part of your responsibility as a person, as a civil scientist, is to share this work. So it's also important for recruitment and retention within the university that we have these kinds of opportunities and supports for our faculty and graduate students coming. And I'll say that our graduate students here at MSU have self-organized over the past few years to create their own organization and have put on their own conferences to have those opportunities to learn about science engagement. Next slide. Finally, on a very operational kind of approach, a good BI plan is going to increase your chances of getting funded. So as Jennifer DeBruyne said in 2018, a great broader impact statement isn't going to float a proposal with poor science. A poor broader impact statement can sink a proposal with good science. There are lots of good proposals out there. I've been on NSF review panels, and it's very challenging to try to pick the ones that are going to go forward and provide those recommendations about them. The broader impact statement is taken very seriously on the panels that I've been in, and it can be a differentiator. I don't want to call it a tiebreaker, but it can be a differentiator among a proposal that's overall excellent versus a proposal overall that's just very good. Okay, next slide. So to give you an idea of what NSF means by benefits to society, the National Alliance for Broader Impacts has provided a list of 9 general BI goal areas that one might say, this is what I want to work on in my proposal, and I need to figure out activities that are going to link the research that I do to be able to meet this goal. You want your goals for your BI activity to fall within, 1 or 2 of these goal areas, and there can be some overlap among them. But for example, a common one that people focus on is full participation of women, persons with disabilities, and underrepresented minorities in STEM. One common way to think about advancing public understanding of science and developing students who are interested in science is improve STEM education and educator development at any level. And that really does mean at any level. I had an NSF grant, and that was for working on science with preschoolers. Increased public scientific literacy and public engagement with science and technology. There's one that's improved well-being of individuals in society overall. So if you have something that could be more applied or could have more direct benefit, you might focus on the improved well-being of individuals in society. Development of a diverse and globally competitive STEM workforce. This is one on workforce development that I think is just beginning to be better articulated about what that means. Go to the next slide, Miles. Enhanced infrastructure for research and education. This is things more about buildings, equipment, centers, things like that. Increased partnerships between academia, industry, and others. It's clear, I think, to everybody that we need to have these increased partnerships to be able to be more effective. Increased collaboration means that we're going to have better impact. Increased economic competitiveness of the United States and improved national security. Those are 2 that are pretty large. Don't see a lot of them at the kind of level that we're providing support at, but maybe a large center grant or something, and for national security, those are pretty specific to particular disciplines. Next slide.
Okay, now we're going to poll you to see which of those 9 goal areas you are most likely to pursue in your broader impacts work. You can pick as many as you like. Okay, Julie, how's the participation looking?
Julie, if you said something, you're muted.
We're at 65%, 24,
Okay.
25. Oh, it's going up.
Okay. We'll give folks just a few more seconds. Interesting. Okay, so improved well-being of individuals in society got the highest number. That was 64%. Full participation, also commonly known as broadening participation, was next with 54%, and that's a tie with increased partnerships between academia and industry. Great. And increased public scientific literacy. So this is fairly well distributed. And as Laurie noted, economic competitiveness and improved national security get less attention. So maybe that's something that we can change. All right. Laurie, I'll let you continue.
Okay. So there are 3 ways generally to achieve broader impacts that the NSF has identified. One is through the research itself. An example is, why don't more women of color study mechanical engineering? So in this case, it's not doing mechanical engineering specifically, but it's looking at why are women of color not studying mechanical engineering in order to increase that participation. It could be activities that are directly related to specific research projects. So you might be recruiting women of color to work on the project and building the capacity and the diversity of STEM professionals and researchers as we go forward. And then it could be through activities that are supported by, but complementary to the project. And so this is something that happens quite often. Both of these last 2 happen a lot. Conduct outreach to high school students in diverse school districts. So the research itself, basically building broader impacts into the process of doing the research, or having actual complementary activities that are going along with it. You can go along, Miles. So here are some of the really common ways to do BI. So one might do K-12 outreach. It might be talks, but it might be doing something that's developing a curriculum, working with teachers and helping them build that into their coursework in using the NGSS, the science standards that will work with the school. You might bring students into your lab. And a lot of the time people will build in as part of their BI, not all of it, because I think this is not sufficient in most cases, but you might be recruiting students who are from underrepresented groups into the lab to work, or making sure that there's postdocs that are targeting underrepresented groups. Curriculum development, that might be at any level. Again, it could be pre-K, K-12, it could be at the undergraduate level too. Broadening participation is really anything that is broadening participation for underrepresented groups. Women, if you're in an underrepresented discipline where women are underrepresented, or persons with disabilities, which is a pretty underdone area. And so it's a really interesting place to think about doing some broadening participation. You might have a project that, or a research project that lends itself to citizen science, where you can build citizens in from the public to be able to collect or analyze data. Science communications is something that's a really great way, if you haven't done any of this before, to dip your feet into it. And that might be through articles, blogs, video vlogs, I guess. It might be doing presentations. So all that kind of thing. STEM workforce development is really working with people to develop their skills to be in the STEM workforce. And then developing research infrastructure, again, is going to be something that usually has physical capabilities that are being added to the institution, or particularly to a partner institution. There are 12 domains of, these 12 domains of public engagement come from our colleague, Elise Auerbach, at the Center for Academic Innovation at the University of Michigan. So reviewing this can help you narrow down what kind of BI activity you want to do with your audience. I'm not going to read through them, but I want to take a moment where you can take a look at what these are, kind of have them in your pocket for further discussion later, if you're interested. Okay, and we'll send this out and you'll be able to look at it in further detail. I want to give you a few examples. I'm going to give you 3 examples that are from Michigan State. So the first one is this MSU Science Festival. This is one of our favorite examples. We encourage everybody to build this into their proposals as part of their BI because it's quite easy. All you need is a presentation, a compelling presentation, or a hands-on activity. There are, is the application still open, Miles, for 2022 for submissions?
You know, I don't know whether it's still open.
All right, well, if it isn't, get involved in 2023, but build it into your proposal. The website has a lot of tips for engaging the public in your science, and it's about a month-long science festival that MSU puts on. And normally it would be in person. I think they're doing a hybrid version this year. We've done it, obviously virtually for the last couple of years. And really the goal here that one would be fulfilling is increased public science literacy, scientific literacy, and public engagement with science and technology. So it's a very easy thing for you to build in, or for your graduate students to build in, to engage with the public. And then there's support if you haven't done it before, or just want to see what others are doing. There's supports to be able to, how do you do a compelling presentation for the public? And lots of opportunity for that. So we encourage that. BI example 2 is something, do the slide, is something that was funded recently. You can see that this is a press release from December 8th of 2021, and it's about increasing computer science equity and access in Detroit by Professor Aman Yadav in the College of Education. He has been developing his BI portfolio over time. And if you go to the link, you can see sort of what he's done over the years. And for this one, which is a $1 million grant in partnership with University of Detroit Mercy, they're focusing on full participation of women, persons with disabilities, and underrepresented minorities, improve STEM education and educator development, and then development of a diverse, globally competitive STEM workforce. And they're doing that by partnering with University of Detroit Mercy, where an instructor is going to co-teach with a high school teacher for a year to build their capacity as a teacher to engage students in computer science. And they're also going to educate school counselors on what are computer science careers. And as all of this, it's also focusing on developing and infusing culturally responsive computing into the curriculum. So they're not simply taking the majority view of how you do this, which is really an enormous barrier to broadening participation into computer science, and making sure to develop ways that this is something that's culturally responsive and thinking about computing from the perspective of what was probably going to be a predominantly African-American population. So that's a neat one, and there's a link there where you can go and look at that more. And then the third example I wanted to share is very different, and this one is really one of those kind of, it's both basic and applied research about but the goal is to improve well-being of individuals in society. And they're also increasing partnerships between academia, industry, and others. And what they're doing has a grant to prevent wheelchair pressure injuries. And this is Tamara Reed Bush out of mechanical engineering. And what they're looking at is from a biomedical perspective, where pressure points come in wheelchairs and how they can modify those to ensure that there isn't pressure injuries. So it's a very practical, ultimately a very practical impact for people who are in wheelchairs, but they're partnering with industry to be able to do that. So Miles, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Laurie, for a great introduction and overview. I think that was really helpful. I'm going to turn attention now to the elements and features of a good BI plan. One of the things I really enjoy doing is helping faculty design solid BI plans. So a great BI plan is meaningfully connected to your research. And that means it's developed concurrently with and integrated into your research plan rather than being an afterthought. It should grow naturally from your research. There should be some connection between the content or topic of your research and the BI activity. I want to emphasize the concurrent development part. All too often, BI plans can be an afterthought rather than being developed along with the research plan. And that's a mistake because just as a good research plan takes time to develop, so does a BI plan. And very often for broader impact activities, you want to identify partners either on campus or off campus that'll help you reach your target audience. And you want to give time to develop that relationship with your partner and have them involved in the design of the activity because they know the context and know the audience perhaps better than you do. And also, to get to the second point on this slide, very often partners are sources of innovative and creative ideas. So NSF expects that your broader impact plan, just like your research plan, is going to be innovative. It's not going to be the standard fare. It's not going to be predictable, canned, or tacked on. In fact, NSF has started using the language transformative around BI activities. So as a counterexample, let's say your area of research is nuclear physics. You wouldn't want to, at the last minute, pick an off-the-shelf engagement activity for middle schoolers that you found on YouTube and propose it to your partner at the last minute. Give it time to develop, identify your potential partners early on, and allow them to be part of the creative process of designing an innovative BI activity. And on April 12th, we're going to have a whole workshop on different MSU partners that you can work with to develop great BI activities. So a good BI plan is also realistic and feasible. It's not so ambitious that it interferes with your research. Don't let your BI plan eat your research project. It should also envision impacts that are realistic and relevant to the particular funding agency. So NSF is going to expect you to evaluate the impacts of your broader impact activity. And therefore, it's a good idea to have impacts identified that are SMART, or specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time delimited. And just as with your research, your BI plan should be solidly grounded in the relevant literature. There are substantial literatures now around common BI activities, like the ones that Laurie listed earlier, K-12 outreach, broadening participation. And reviewers will be expecting you to reference that literature to provide a case for why your BI activity will have the impacts that you say it's going to have. And also, it's helpful to have preliminary data on hand to share about the kind of BI activity you're proposing. Just as with your research, it demonstrates proof of concept. It demonstrates that the BI activity that you're proposing has some evidence behind it to support it achieving the impacts that you say it will. Sorry, I just had a glitch in my screen. It went black. Another element of a great BI plan is that you demonstrate that the team that's going to do the BI activity has the adequate experience, partners, and resources. It's just like it is for your research plan, where the reviewers are going to be looking to make sure that the team that's proposing the research is actually capable of doing it. So it helps to have BI leads on the team that have some prior BI experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be the PI who has that BI experience. Very often you can find partners on or off campus who have BI experience to lead the BI activity. It's also important in your BI plan to show that you've clearly identified your BI partners, who's going to help you reach your target audience and how, and that these partners are established instead of thrown together at the last minute. And also, as I said before, establishing those partners early on and having conversations with them about the BI plan means that it'll be better developed, it'll be more contextually appropriate, and very often more innovative and creative. And also, it's important, as it is for your research plan, to budget adequately for your BI activity. If the reviewers look at your budget for BI and see it's insufficient, they may form the impression that you're not taking your BI activity seriously. So again, adequate experience on the team, established partners, and adequate resources to support a good BI plan. And then finally, every good BI plan includes an evaluation plan, a plan to evaluate the processes, outputs, and outcomes of BI activities. And very often, you'll want to partner with an evaluation expert to help you do that. And then finally, a dissemination plan. How are you going to share the impacts? How are you going to contribute to the growing body of literature on broader impacts? And there are very several publication outlets available to you to share that. So now I want to talk about what I see as the core elements of a BI plan. So any BI plan you put together should have these 6 pieces. First, the goals. What impacts do you hope to achieve? Think about those 9 goal areas that Laurie talked about earlier. Second, who do you want to reach? Who's your audience? What is the target population? Who do you want to communicate your science to? And very often, who the audience or focal population is, has implications for the kinds of partners. So who are the partners that can help you reach that particular audience? And what settings do they commonly reach that audience in? Fourth, what is the specific BI activity? Fifth, what are the resources you're going to use to support the BI activity? And then how are you going to evaluate the impacts of that BI activity? So people often ask, so where do I describe my BI plan in my proposal? Well, it can go a lot of places. So the first place to put it is in your project description, which is, typically around 15 pages. And it should be no more than about the last 1 to 2 pages. So that gives you enough room to, in a fairly detailed way, describe what the activity is and how you intend to evaluate it. And then a briefer version of that, about a third of a page, goes in the project summary. But it can also show up in all these other places. So it can show up in the special information and supplementary documentation section. It can be in the postdoc mentoring plan, especially if one of your aims is to broaden participation in your lab and you're planning to bring in a diverse group of postdocs. It can also go in the data management plan if you intend to collect the BI data, and you probably should for the sake of the evaluation. It could be reflected in your letters of collaboration, especially if you have internal or external partners that are going to help you support or partner with you on your BI activities. It can go in the bio sketch if you have substantial prior BI experience. And then, as I said before, with regard to the budget, it can go in the budget and justification. So now what I want to do is I want to share some really terrific broader impact resources with you. And these are going to help you get started in developing your BI plan. And so what I would like to advise all of you to do, if you're at the stage of working on your BI plan, is to go to these resources and start there. And then once you have a rough outline or a draft of your BI plan, please send it to me. That's one of my favorite things to do is to review BI plans and talk to principal investigators and provide advice about how to build a really robust BI plan that's going to garner a lot of attention from reviewers. So the first thing I want to bring to your attention is what's called the Broader Impacts Guiding Principles, which were developed by NABI. And you can see that they're available at the researchinsociety.org website. So I am going to stop sharing slides for a second and take you to that website because it's so terrific. Okay, almost there. All right, Julie, can you confirm that you can see the ARIS website?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, fantastic. So this is the ARIS website. Laurie talked about this. Laurie's on the leadership team of ARIS. Its prior iteration was the National Alliance for Broader Impacts. So there are many, many resources available on this. So this is, to me, sort of the one-stop shop for broader impacts. It talks about the annual summits, training available, fellowships, awards, a huge amount of resources. But what I want to direct your attention to are the 2 resources that are right on the home page, and that's the guiding principles. So if you go to the guiding principles, what you find is a tool that was created by NABI really to assist reviewers in being able to evaluate the quality of a broader impacts plan. So you can see it, contains that list of 9 broader impact areas. But then it also has a series of questions to ask about the broader impacts plan. So, question 1 is, what is the potential for the proposed activity to benefit society or advance desired societal outcomes? I won't go all the way through this, but if these are the criteria by which reviewers are evaluating a broader impacts plan, then it's a great idea for proposers to have a clear idea of these criteria and the kinds of questions that reviewers might be asking. So NABI has done a really clever thing, and they've turned this into a checklist, which I'll show you in just a moment, that you can use for your proposal. So that is one resource I would suggest you look at. And the other wonderful thing that that ERIS has made available is this broader impacts wizard. And I absolutely love this. And again, it can be accessed at the researchandsociety.org website. So here's how it's organized from left to right. Again, the guiding principles.
Miles,
Yes.
I think we're still seeing the ERIS winner.
Okay. Thank you for saying that.
When an audience member noted it, and thank you for doing that.
Okay, can you see?
ERIS Broader Impacts Toolkit now.
Okay, right, that's what I wanted to bring you to. So on the left, you see, again, there's the guiding principles, the planning checklist I just referred to, which is based on the guiding principles. So here you go. This is a checklist against which to compare your broader impact activity, or to think about as you're writing it. Okay, so now I should be back to the page with the 4 tiles. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then look at the top up here in the ribbon at the top. And it will talk about all of these different plan elements. So there's an introduction, a question about who I will engage, who my partners will be, what's my target audience. One of the really cool things that they've done in this wizard is that they've given you the literature connections. So depending on the particular audience that you've targeted for your broader impacts activity, you can go and look at some of the latest research. So remember when I said earlier that that every good BI plan should be as solidly based on the literature as your research plan? Well, here you go. This is the place to go to look for those literature connections. How much will it cost? So that's a series of questions that will guide you through building a budget. How is it relevant to society? And then how will I know if my BI project is successful? That's the evaluation part. Excuse me. The wizard takes you through these 4 steps: your activity, who you will engage, how you'll do it, how will you know you've done it, the evaluation part. And then you get a summary at the end. So if you go through the wizard and you answer the questions, fill in the boxes, out of the end of the wizard comes a draft BI plan. So I suggest going through and working through the wizard, addressing the questions in it, and then sending your draft evaluation plan to us so that we can help you make it even better. Okay, so let me get out of this. And back to our slide deck. Okay, so we talked about the guiding principles, the BI wizard. I mentioned a little bit about how ARIS has many, many resources. So there's an annual Broader Impacts Conference called the ARIS Summit. They provide webinars on a continual basis to go over the basics of BI. So if you go to the researchandsociety.org website, you can sign up for the webinars, sign up to be part of the ARIS community, so you're getting regular communication. And then just a tremendous amount of online resources of a variety of kinds. And then University Outreach and Engagement also has a BI website, and you see the URL down there at the bottom. Julie, if you could paste that into the chat so that people can access, that would be wonderful. So you can come to this website to learn what the review criteria are, to do a deep dive into what the area of broadening participation is about. You can view examples of broader impact activities. There's support for creating a broader impacts plan. We also have a list of many, many potential MSU partners. MSU has just a wealth of broader impacts partners to help you think about your broader impacts plan and figure out how to effectively engage with a particular focal group. You can always brainstorm with us about your broader impacts ideas. And as I've said, I love to review broader impacts plans, so please send those to me. And then just finding general resources. So there are many people at MSU who can consult with you about your broader impacts plans. Contact your associate deans of research. They usually have terrific ideas. Your college research administrators. Laurie and I provide support around broader impacts too. And then if you're really new to what evaluation is about, NSF created this terrific guide called the User-Friendly Handbook for Project Evaluation from 2010. And as it said, it's very user-friendly. If you've got no experience with evaluation, this is a great place to start. I also have many, many years of evaluation experience, so very often I can provide useful ideas about how to evaluate the impacts of your broader impact activities. And then, you know, this session today is just meant to give you a taste of what building a great broader impact plan is, but we have 7 other workshops that are coming up this spring. The one on February 8th is focused on building your research impact identity and vision. So this is a way of thinking not just about your identity as a researcher, but more broadly, the kinds of impacts that you would like to have, not just with the next project, but throughout your career, and how you can draw on other elements of your identity to create that impact identity vision and plan. On March 3rd, we're going to have a workshop focused on NSF career proposals. Dr. Angela Wilson has agreed to come back and provide us with some tips. She did such a wonderful job last year. We're really looking forward to that. We're also going to feature 3 MSU researchers who have recently won career awards, so we can hear from them about the strategies they used. On March 21st, we're going to have a broadening participation focused workshop where we will be highlighting partners at MSU to help you meet your broadening participation goals. We have, again, a wealth of resources and programs at MSU designed to do just that with both graduate and undergraduate students. Then on April 5th, I'll be leading a deep dive into the mechanics of how you build your broader impacts plan, talking about those 5 elements in great detail. And by the end of that workshop, you should have a draft broader impacts plan. On April 12th, we'll be featuring MSU Partners for Broader Impacts, who are all of the program heads and facilities directors who can work with you on your broader impacts plan, including the MSU Museum, the Broad Museum, Extension. I think we have something like 6 different panelists who will be sharing how to partner with them to reach your target audience. On April 26th, I'll have a workshop focused on how to evaluate the broader impacts of your research. And then we're going to wrap up in May, date to be determined, with the panel really focused on that broader impacts goal of achieving impacts through industry partnerships, commercialization, and entrepreneurship. And the link to check these out and to register for them is at the bottom. And I believe Julie is going to put that in the chat for you. Which brings us to Q&A. So if you have questions for us, please put them in the Q&A. We'll also check the chat to see if they're there. Okay, I'm looking at the Q&A and I'm not seeing any questions yet. Surely there are at least some questions. Okay, so I see a question, will a documentary count as broader impacts? It certainly could. It certainly could, because that's public communication. That's engagement through a documentary. So I think that's a yes, a strong yes.
Yeah, and I think what you would want to do is also fill in what is the dissemination plan for that documentary. NSS has there are many ways you could do it. I just want to throw out there that NSS has a competition each year and a showcase of videos, but those are short. So it wouldn't be a full documentary, but people post videos about their projects, and then there's a voting process. So that's one way to use video for any project. And then they have a sort of a conversational back and forth. A documentary, a way you might build a documentary into a broader impacts proposal would be to partner with somebody who is a documentarian, or somebody, so you might be using that with the College of Communication, Arts and Sciences to see if there are students who might be interested in developing their skills as documentarians to work with that. So there are partnerships that one might be able to build if you don't have those particular skills. And then you'd put that into your BI plan, and that would make it even stronger. There's another question that's, is BI focused on NSF funding or extends to other funding sources? So we mentioned this a little bit at the front, where NSF calls societal impact broader impacts. That's their terminology for it. Other funding sources might call it research impact. They might call it engagement. They might call it public impact. They might use any kind of different phrasing. They might even refer to the process instead. And instead of referring to the impact, they might talk about, we would like you to build community engaged research into this. Or, there's a lot of different ways to talk about this work. So when we say broader impacts, we're referring specifically to NSF, but it can be a part of many other kinds of agencies, and it is increasingly becoming so. And there are certainly efforts nationally to try to help the different agencies or have the different agencies work together to think about building impact as a not necessarily sometimes a criteria, but certainly a part of the proposal that would be evaluated. Miles, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, do you think it's fair to say that every funding agency expects benefits to society?
I think they do, but I think some are more explicit about it than others. Yeah. I don't think it can never be a bad thing to describe what the impacts to society would be. It shows that you have a larger perception of the context in which you're working than simply focusing on, you may be in an esoteric area. There may not be a lot of people in the world. You may have incredibly important research that not a lot of people understand. I mean, that's a thing that happens. And so being able to link that to the larger context can be helpful, I think.
All right, I don't see any more questions, but Laurie and I are always available to talk to you about broader impacts. It's something we really enjoy doing. We look forward to meeting new faculty and learning about what they're thinking about and trying to find them the right partners to work with and develop great BI plans. So please contact us. Here is our contact information. We'd love to talk with you.
And we have another comment in here, Miles.
Oh, great.
Yeah, BI of basic research often reads to me like wishful thinking. This might lead to XYZ or reaching. We'll make an interactive educational toy for Community Festival Day. How can we better brainstorm BI plans? Yeah, those are really good points because sometimes the research is the basic research, it doesn't translate that well directly to something that you can do in a public engagement forum. But I think that we have quite a bit of experience in brainstorming what those BI plans might be. And sometimes you end up having not as much of a direct link of your exact research, but maybe more the broader concept that your research is about, to helping the public begin to understand that's even something that exists. Sometimes they don't know, and people get very, very excited about that. So I think the best thing to do is reach out to Miles in particular, but also me, and say and just start brainstorming. And I think those conversations tend to go in lots and lots of different directions when we just sit down and start talking about what the possibilities are. And especially, what are you interested in? Like, what kinds of things would you like to do? Because it needs to be something you're interested in, or you're not going to want to do it. Right? It needs to be something that feels meaningful to you. And so, there's a program going on at MSU that just set up its pilot year here. And that was STEM ambassadors, where people were really thinking through what is their broader impacts identity, and, what are populations that you might like to engage in that you may not have thought about before.
Yeah, Jory, I think that's a really great and very good skeptical question. And I'll just go back to a realistic BI plan as being one of the key elements of a good BI plan, that you don't overpromise, that you don't propose to achieve things that you can't possibly achieve, or you couldn't measure the attainment of those things. Your reviewers are going to expect to see an evaluation plan. And they're smart people, and they're gonna smell a rat if you've clearly promised something that's far beyond what the particular BI activity could actually achieve. And so, when I talk about BI plans, I really try to emphasize the attainable part of that. I mean, and what's practical in terms of what you can actually evaluate. You can't necessarily follow people throughout their career to determine whether engaging with diverse high school students leads to a more diverse STEM workforce. You simply can't do that. You can assess the extent to which you increase their interest in careers in science, and that's what you should do, and not promise beyond that. So do we have any other? So thank you for that question, Jory. That's excellent. One more request from us. Please point your camera at the QR code on the screen. This is our workshop survey. We'd love to have feedback. We always do surveys, feedback surveys of these, and use that information to improve them. So tell us what you liked, tell us what we can improve on. We'd love to hear from you. And we hope you'll contact us for help with your BI plans. And if there are no further questions, it's 10 o'clock and we can close out the session. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everybody.